So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end, Yirmiyahu the prophet. Then we find the 61st chapter, the completion of the spring feast, the mentioning of the autumn feast or vengeance, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we understand then the time of the transition of governments and the importance of then trade and fuel, then we must make decisions as far as where our country then is heading towards. As we understand, there is then the Ozarks area where then the government is then moving to a new capital. So then we must understand what they are doing, plus their plans of depopulation of Louisiana and also the Gulf Coast, and the importance of understanding a federal company of petroleum, so they can deal with so many rights involved with distinct companies. If the government takes a stand in favor of companies and then they disregard the rights of the people, then they find a problem. Because depopulating the area, then they have to confront the rights of the people, where then the companies and the people, they have the same level of rights. So then for the government to do their plan, they must start up their own petroleum company, where then they regulate then the petroleum industry, so then for the benefit of individuals and companies, then the government can make their move. But obviously we have to have these a clear objective so people then can understand what the government is doing. Because thus far whatsoever we find in the news is absolutely shameful. At least then yesterday came out some information regarding then the companies or then the retail online people responsible for charging proper taxes. After so many years without charging proper taxes, then yesterday came out. So then, understandably, then the Gulf Coast is very important, because then, as we understand, the trade of the future, where then China is part of the BRICS, as we understand then later, lots of trade must be done via online along with investments. As we understand, ever since then computers came out, the Chinese already figured they could use the computer as a means of regulation, so then New York Exchange would be obsolete. This a long time ago was done. So then, as we understand then, the system is becoming online, trade online, investments online, where people invest on products, not in companies. Then we are then providing ourselves with more information, where we can understand then why the government is pushing for depopulation of those areas, and then the pumping of crude. But then the only way they can do this truly in a legal fashion is then by starting their own government petroleum company, as you find in many countries. For instance, in South America you find Brazil and Petrobras, for instance, Petroleum of Brazil. So then they control and they regulate the petroleum industry. But then in America it doesn't work this way. As if the government was acting as individual, dealing then with other individuals, and then dealing with civilian or people as the same level of individuals. Then renders the government with no power of making such a move. And if they do, then becomes non-legal. Because then what comes out of the understanding is they are giving preference companies as individuals, and then the government not having any influence with regulation of petroleum because they are not part of it. They must become part of the petroleum trade. So then justifies a move where then companies and individuals as people, they can benefit from the changes. And then obviously at some point becoming then the North America trading post. As you can understand, then Panama becoming a trading post of Central America. We find then obviously Brazil being the South American trading post. In the Pacific, in the South Pacific, you find the Southern Isle of New Zealand. So then the European Union then gets resolved in dismantling their Euro junk, and then we can start rebuilding ourselves. So then there are lots of potential of changes, but if we don't start our own petroleum company as federal petroleum company, then any kind of move towards the population renders them non-legal, because they are picking preferences rather than making beneficial for every person. So then this situation must be then cleared and exposed so people understand what to do. It would be then a national project of upgrading of our fuels because of the future trade system and preparing ourselves as the trading post of the North. So not only would combine a very big, huge refinery in the Gulf Coast, but then would obviously providing a trading post, meaning then modern ports where then not only they can dock, but they can drive through. As we understand, the system of containers of the 50s, also invented by an American, it's outdated. Extremely outdated, takes a long time, whereas then if we understand the modules, or then in quote bundling of these containers and modules, and then using railways on the side of the ship and the water as elevating system, it would be then as it is in Panama Canal, but then ships would simply drive through, and then locks would lock the place, and then up and down would use the water level, so then it becomes a whole lot simpler. Doesn't have to have expensive cranes and such. So then there are lots of spaces of improvement, but then we must understand as a population what the government is intending. Thus far they are doing the Ozarks over there, hiding from the people, FEMA camps hiding from the people. People must be informed. So when the government then comes clean, then the people can make the proper adjustments, as long as then the benefits would be for both companies and also the people. They can consider then moving out of the area in favor of these new changes and more refineries and more jobs for the people and the such, plus then upgrading the port. At some point it's kind of obvious.